Just because your employer does an annual raise doesn't mean you can't ask for one outside of that or negotiate the increase to be higher. There are a ton of scenarios that might warrant a larger increase than their standard or one outside of their typical raise season. It's normal in business for roles to evolve and for responsibilities to change. It also happens that a company's standard annual cost of living salary increases don't align with the realities of inflation. Whether you're a veteran at the company or a prospective employee, you can and oftentimes should negotiate your salary. In a previous video, we talked about emerging pay transparency laws and the impacts they can have on new and prospective employees in certain states. Now let's talk with Lexi Clarke, Chief Human Resources Officer at Payscale, about how to navigate those conversations. And then we'll go through the actual steps to take when negotiating your salary.
Salary negotiations. It used to be that, the hiring manager would say, tell me how much you're making right now. And then you'd bounce back with, well, how much are you willing to pay and things like that. But with new pay transparency laws, does that mean that the negotiation part goes away?
I think that it's such an interesting question. So I think, I don't think the negotiations go away, but I think the interesting thing is candidates really can leverage some of that information that is now posted in those salary ranges included in job postings for the negotiation conversations. And so if I think about just pay transparency in general, that's really helping to make any candidate or employee's job search and the employer's recruiting search much more efficient. And so, candidates are looking and they only really want to pursue those roles that they know that they can get kind of where they think that they're worth in kind of those conversations and where they feel like they'll be fairly compensated. And that means that they're not kind of necessarily wasting time with companies that may be below that threshold of what they're expecting to make.
There are a lot of potential benefits with pay transparency. If you know the range an employer is willing to pay for a job, then you know how much you can expect to earn.
But when you see this pay range, and sometimes there's a big range, do you think pay transparency opens up the opportunity for employees to have more open conversation about, like, this is a big range, and is it because, X employee is actually making this, or do we both have the possibility to make this?
Yeah, I think pay transparency levels the playing field. And I think it levels the playing field between those employers and employees, those candidates and those employers. I think regardless of if you are in the initial stages of joining a company, so you're at the offer stage of things, or maybe you're in the middle of your comp review process, I think it allows for those conversations to be open and feel more like kind of a two-way street. I think organizations are really having to make sure that they're anchoring those salary structures, the comp decisions, in data and in market data in order to drive kind of more open and transparent conversations around fair pay or why they pay like they do.
A Society for Human Resource Management survey found that 73% of U.S. workers are more likely to trust organizations that provide pay ranges. Do your research by checking salary ranges from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics using salary comparison sites such as Payscale or Salary.com.
And I think it's also encouraging employees, candidates, workers, anyone to really understand and research fair pay for their role in the job market. And so, I think about, again, kind of Payscale offers that free online salary survey. You can plug in your years of experience, everything that is unique to you, not only in the role that you're in right now or the roles that you are looking for, but you can plug in certifications and skill sets and all of those pieces. That is really going to help someone equip themselves with what am I worth and what am I worth within the market? What should I make sure I'm looking for in kind of maybe that next step in my career or those next roles? And I think it really kind of helps open the door to more transparent kind of data-driven conversations.
Absolutely. The know your worth thing and going in with data to support advocating for yourself to get that amount, I think is key.
Absolutely.
Most managers expect job candidates to negotiate salary. Plan ahead the specific dollar amount that you want and avoid offering a range. Settle on the salary first before switching to other forms of compensation.
Do you think it's worth it for a candidate if they see the perfect position, but the scale is just a little bit lower than what they may have hoped for? Do you think there is any potential flexibility for them to advocate for themselves to get something that's outside of that range? Or do you think the range is what it is?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I think since we've seen such an increase in transparency legislation and in employers starting to post those roles, I think all companies are tackling this differently in what makes the most sense for them on where they are in their compensation journey. And so that might mean that a salary range posted on a role, while it's still a good faith range in terms of what the legislation really dictates, it might mean for them that that range is to maybe the maximum is actually what a current employee is making at the company, or the maximum is what their budget will allow for in bringing on that role. It can mean a ton of different things, or the maximum is kind of their true maximum in what they think.
When negotiating, if the employer can't meet your salary requirements right now, it's still possible to negotiate for other things in the interim. Maybe it's a title change, additional benefits, more flexible schedule, or retirement contributions.
There's a lot of power there. And so I absolutely think that even if, a range might be a little bit below where someone is targeting, it's worth having that conversation.
And then say that they negotiate themselves really well and go in at the high end of the pay scale. Should they feel any concern that I'm at the max that this new company I'm about to join is willing to pay? What happens in a year or two when I want a raise?
It is such a great time for the employer or the candidate to ask the question. And so I think such an important part of those offer conversations now is not just here's what my offer is going to be and here's what I'm excited about joining, but it's having that future facing conversation. What are your compensation adjustment processes? What do you look at when you think about pay equity within the organization, or the next time that I might be eligible for an increase? All of those types of questions that may center around a true compensation strategy at the company, I think are fair game as we think about kind of a candidate accepting an offer. If we've learned anything, I think the data will set us free in having that voice and having those types of open dialogues. But I think if you are in that place where you see that your offer is coming close to that max or at the maximum of the range, absolutely ask the question, what does this mean for me 12 months from now, 18 months from now, 24 months from now? Because the other thing that's really important is that someone feels like there is potential wage growth within that role. And we are seeing kind of anecdotally, we don't have any data around this at Payscale, but we are seeing employers starting to open up that conversation more and more during the recruiting process to comment on things like that. I will say candidly, internally at Payscale, we do that. So if we are making an offer and someone is kind of close to that max of the range, we'll talk candidly with them about any impact that may have later down the road, or anything that we take into account as it relates to internal equity or that future wage growth over time.
So I'm wondering if we can shift to existing employees a little bit,
Yes,
because
absolutely.
What do you do if you're an employee and your employer presents you with this pay range and you find yourself at the very bottom of the pay range? Should employees take any action? Should they consider at that point trying to negotiate themselves a little higher? And I imagine that there's some just initial like how dare they put me at the bottom of this range and after I've been working so hard. How do you recommend that they kind of navigate that?
Yeah. I think if you are an employee and you see a job range where you are, very low within the range, maybe even outside of the range, under the range for any reason, it is a great time to engage in a compensation conversation with your employer. Of course, you want to take into account anything around how is the company financially performing. If you're in a company that maybe has recently done layoffs or something like that, understanding the economic environment and financial performance is also a key data point, right, to take in, because it may mean that your employer is not quite in a position, right, where they can make any changes. But I think that those types of conversations, I see any conversation around compensation, you start with an offer, right, when you're first joining the company, and every year after that, it's an opportunity for the company to build trust with the employees that are doing that work and doing those jobs. And so I think if an employee is seeing that, if you're seeing that and you're having that kind of gut sinking feeling of what does this mean? And have I been being paid fairly? And what does continued growth look like? It's a great time to take that data. Payscale also offers, you can go and kind of Payscale yourself and see what the market dictates for the role that you're in, the years of experience you have, and those skill sets, and use that data to drive the conversation. I think, now more than ever, we are getting into territory where these conversations are driven by that data, and they're driven by the data in the job postings. They're driven by the data that is online, kind of at our fingertips. And it is the right time for employees to really advocate for understanding their pay. Maybe they're in a place where their company can't take any action today, but it will help them really deeply understand, how are compensation decisions made at my organization? What does this mean for me? And how comfortable am I with where I am kind of within my pay range and what that future might look like? And so I think that transparency requirement really kind of pushes us in that right direction for employees to have the data that maybe they've been wondering about or looking for a little bit now.
All right, now how do you take all of that information and turn it into an actual conversation with your current or prospective employer? First, do your research. Sites like Payscale, Indeed, or Salary.com can help you settle on a range, as can asking your company's HR team for your role's pay range. Arming yourself with this information can help you decide A, if the timing is right to ask for a raise, and B, how much is reasonable to request. You'll also want to put together a list of your contributions to the company. Maybe you'll create a slideshow, print up an informative packet, or maybe you'll just make a list and arrive prepared to discuss them. If the meeting is taking place remotely via Zoom or another platform, make sure you're comfortable with the software in advance so that you don't get flustered when the time comes. Speaking of arriving prepared, be sure to practice the conversation beforehand until you're confident. Know exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it, and consider rehearsing it with a partner or a friend in advance. You'll also want to request a general meeting with your supervisor ahead of time, so the conversation is on the calendar and you can both dedicate time to it. There's no need to mention it's a compensation discussion yet. Instead, consider telling them you'd like to have a career conversation about your role and future at the company. When the time comes, be sure to lead the conversation with gratitude. Share that you're appreciative of your position, all you've been able to learn and accomplish, and express your excitement to continue to help the company grow. Focus on your value to the company, as opposed to highlighting your own personal needs for a raise. Once you've requested the dollar amount you want, and you've said all you needed to say, be comfortable in the silence. You've had time to prepare, but your supervisor did not. Don't feel the need to fill the silences with unnecessary rambling. After that, the proverbial ball is in your employer's court. If they can't meet your request right now, you've still opened the doors for the next conversation. And maybe you'll get something else out of the conversation in the interim, like a title change, additional benefits, a more flexible schedule, or retirement contributions. Consider asking your employer how you can add more value or skills to increase your salary and your opportunity for promotion down the road. If they do agree to a pay increase or alternative, be sure to get that in writing. Send them a thank you email summarizing the conversation and express your gratitude for the outcome. As I mentioned, negotiating your salary as a job candidate is not much different than negotiating as an existing employee. You'll still need to do the research to understand what is fair, and you'll still want to practice before going in. You'll also still want to have the target dollar amount you'd like to receive in mind before going into the conversation. If you're looking for work in a state that falls under new pay transparency guidelines, use the listed scale to empower your negotiation and help you prepare a case for why you belong at the higher end of the scale. Just remember to be realistic in your conversations. Wanting more money and feeling as if you deserve more money are two entirely different things. Ultimately, pay transparency laws could take some of the guesswork out of determining salary ranges, but they don't eliminate the negotiation part of the conversation. Pay transparency can save employers and job seekers time and create a more transparent and equitable job market. And as an existing employee, it can help you have more informed conversations with your supervisor about your compensation. Just remember what I said before: research, have a plan and prep, and don't be afraid to ask for the pay that you deserve. Good luck. Thanks for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a two-part video. Make sure you check out the previous video to understand all the pay transparency laws that I talked about a lot in this video. I'll see you there. Bye.